Hi, welcome to the Pursuit of Truth. So I've been watching the coverage, obviously, of the Syrian and Turkey earthquake, and obviously there's been some very moving moments in it, which there was one moment I thought I wanted to share on the Pursuit of Truth, for two reasons. One, it shows about how important it is that we change the world that we live in. I know I bang on about this all the time, the system that we live in, and how that if we all work together as humanity, we've got rid of money and this old system of division and power and greed and all that kind of stuff, and worked for the benefit of humanity, how beneficial it would be. And this is another example of a man-made disaster. How if we'd already been living the world I keep talking about, where we support each other, where we build up each other's infrastructure so we're all equal, which there's a reluctance to do that because countries want to have power over other countries. They want to have economic power because that's, if you look at where all the manufacturing and outsourcing is all done in the West, it's poorer countries because they've already set up the financial system so their money is worth less, and so therefore you can make more money out of that by employing staff and stuff like that. We all know that it goes on. This is a shameful thing that we're all part of. Is a form of slavery. Well, work is a form of slavery, especially those ones that have no benefit to them, to humanity. That is just about competition and power and greed. But anyway, so, if we'd already lived in a world where we all shared expertise, this story wouldn't have happened. It's a man who's talking about how, well, I'll let him speak the words and you can hear and you'll know what I'm talking about. And also the fact that this building fell down because the columns were removed because the shop wanted to have more space. Why did they want more space? Because they wanted more money, because they wanted to compete. Money, again, is the reason for this. That if those columns were there, maybe this building would have still stayed up. But they removed them because they wanted more space. This is the world we live in where, is all about money and greed and possession. And these are the things we need to get rid of. And this is, an example, like I try to give on these things. And at the end, there's another one to do with AstraZeneca, if I get time. And that's about how much money they've made. And you see those, companies that, they did a good thing in coming up with these vaccines, but they certainly benefited from it, which is, I knew they would always benefit from it, even if they said they were doing it at a cost, the way they work out cost, they've made so much money, and sometimes that's why companies do things to bring up their name. And it's just interesting how Ian King talks about cancer treatments being, I think he uses the word blockbuster or something like that, which is a very crass way to talk about it, but it sort of demonstrates maybe why cancer treatments don't move on, because these companies are making so much money out of these cancer treatments that simply don't really solve the problem, because people still end up relapsing and end up dying of cancer and yet go through this terrible chemotherapy. Yeah, maybe it gives them time, but there must be better systems. We can't be relying on, this kind of system over and over again without. But the problem is when you're making money out of it, what's the incentive for these companies to ditch it and get rid of something else? Anyway, here's the stories.
Building was not as it should be compared to the others around. Also, I don't know if you can see here, Nathan, if you come with me, and then we can see where the fire extinguisher is. Some of these columns, is what we're being told, were removed in order to make more space for this supermarket. And the relatives of those that are still trapped beneath this rubbish believe that is what contributed to the collapse of this building. We do have other people that we can speak to, so let's move this way and speak to this gentleman over here. Tell me this gentleman's story. So, hello.
Kendi hikayenizi anlatır mısınız?
Kendi hikayemizi göz önünde de. Şimdi
Burada akrabanız var mı?
evet, bütün hepsi benim yeğenlerim.
Kaç kişi?
50 kişiye yakın. 50 kişiye yakın insan buradaydı.
I have nephews, nearly 50 people in that building.
İlk
Siz burada mı yaşıyorsunuz?
Ben burada yaşamıyorum. Ben başka binada yaşıyorum. İlk
I
gün
live very near in another building.
ilk gün buraya geldiğimizde bacağı moloz altında kalan yeğenim vardı. 3 gün boyunca burada bekledik. Bizim maalesef üzülerek bunu söylüyorum. Yani ben de Türkiye'liyim. Üzülerek bunu söylüyorum. 3 gün boyunca burada o ayağı dedi kesip böyle alacağız.
Okay. He says 3 days long, one of my nephews with a leg under the very high cement, the rock. He shouted and shouted, and we couldn't find anyone to get him out there.
So his nephew was trapped.
Yes. And then when the rescue team came, they just said, okay, we're gonna cut the leg and get you out. Yaşıyor mu yeğeniniz?
Onu devam edeceğim. 3 gün sonra 3 gün sonra İspanyol bir ekip geldi. Sağ olsun kendi imkanlarıyla geldi.
After 3 days, a Spanish rescue team came and got him out in 1 hour.
Geldi 5 dakikanın içinde
5 minutes
hiç
they got him out.
çocuğu zarar vermeden çocuğu sağ salim çıkardı. Eğer ki ekipman olmuş olsaydı daha erken burada en aşağı 25 kişi sağ çıkardı.
If equipment was here in the first 2 days, maybe many people could have been saved from this building.
And he's still waiting.
We did everything by our own. Says everybody.
O İspanyol arkadaşlar gelmeyene kadar biz bir ekip görmedik burada.
Until the Spanish rescue team came, we didn't see anybody, any rescue team.
Gelip de ekipmansız elemanlar buraya geldi. Hepsi gönüllü olarak geldi ama ekipman olmadığı için bunu
There were some voluntary teams, rescue teams, but without any equipment, so they couldn't do anything in the second day, and then they went away. The first working rescue team was the Spanish one.
Who does he blame for the government not being here quickly enough for him?
Buraya ilk günlerde herhangi bir kurtarma ekibinin gelmemesiyle ilgili devlete söylemek istediğiniz bir şey var mı? Devleti suçluyor musunuz diye soruyorum.
şu anda devleti suçlama değil. Devlet zaten devlet yoktur. Ben öyle biliyorum yani.
There is no government for us.
Öyle bir şey biz gittiğimiz valiliğe gidiyoruz. Valilik gidin geleceğiz
We
diyorlar.
went to the mayor, we went to the municipality.
Yani öyle bir şey.
They told us, okay, you go to your homes, we will come, and nobody came.
President Erdogan says everything is under control now.
Cumhurbaşkanı Recep Tayyip Erdoğan'ın bir sözünü söylüyor kendisi. Her şey kontrol altında.
Kesinlikle öyle bir şey değil. Yoktur. İkinci gününde Adıyaman valisi basın açıklaması yapıyor diyor 40 tane kaybımız var. Maalesef 40 tane değil 50 tane.
Ne kadar kayıp var Adıyaman'da?
Ben 1 milyona yakın diyorum. O kadar düşünüyorum yani. %85'e gitmiştir.
Okay. He doesn't think the same like President Erdogan. Nothing is under control in Adıyaman. And he believes there are more than 100,000 people already dead here.
That's anecdotal. We must point that out at this stage. Is he hopeful that any of his dozens of relatives, we need to be quiet now, any of his relatives might still be brought out alive?
It's interesting here you see how the media loves these kinds of stories, but yet they won't respect the situation that they're in. People are being told to be quiet because the diggers are calling out to try and hear the smallest of sounds, and yet the journalists carry on talking. Hey, it's terrible, really. It's good that journalists are there because they get to tell us the story and bring us this news, but sometimes their love for it gets in the way. Maybe they're worried about dead air, but they shouldn't be worried about dead air. They're in a situation and they should respect it. If someone tells you to be quiet, it's not just, the journalists can carry on speaking because they're somehow more special than everyone else. No, everyone has to stop because we want no noise so that we can hear the poor dead people that are trapped. And yet you're carrying on with your speaking.
Akrabalarınızın, tanıdıklarınızın canlı çıkabileceğine dair umudunuz var mı?
Umudu yitirdik maalesef. Yani öyle bir şansımız yok. Bütün umutlarımız kırıldı yani.
He says he lost his hope in the last 2 days. He has no hope anymore to take out anyone live anymore.
Yalnız akrabalarım değil, bütün insanlar hepsi benim kardeşim, hepsi benim yeğenim, benim
It's
kardeşim.
not only my relatives who are important. Everybody in this building, everybody in Adıyaman are my brothers and sisters.
Does he know how many people might still be under this wreckage?
Bu binada hala içeride olan kaç kişi olduğu düşünülüyor.
15 kişiye yakın. 15.
En az.
Evet, en az 15 kişiye yakın.
At least 15 that he knows.
And a lot of them are his relatives.
Yes.
We hope that they find them. Thank you for talking to us.
Umarım tanıdıklarımızı, akrabalarımızı buradan bulurlar ve çıkarırlar.
Teşekkür ederim. Ben de size bu duyarlılığı gösterdiğiniz için, dışarıda gelip bizi böyle dünyaya duyurduğunuz için ben de size teşekkür ederim.
He thanks you, Sky News, for collecting all the voices from here and bringing them internationally worldwide. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We're just going to be very quiet as they pause again to see if anybody responds to calls from above the rubble to beneath the rubble, hoping against hope, as I've been saying for many hours now, that some people may still be alive. I'm going to be quiet. Calling down into a hole that has been created. They have specialized listening equipment that has finally arrived. And they're saying, is there anyone here? Can anyone hear us?
No, because journalists keep speaking. And the cameraman keeps moving.
Answer came there none. Unfortunately, again, we've seen that many times already today. John Sparks has been covering this event for us as well, not only here in Turkey, but also in Syria. Here's his report.
The heart of this disaster lies at the end of the road in a mountain city called Kahramanmaraş. The fault line ruptured underneath their feet, forcing tens of thousands into plastic tents. But they have managed to survive the quakes and tremors when many of their neighbors have not. They call this area the Abra district. It's home to a series of apartment buildings, but 9 blocks have been ripped from their foundations. Their occupants buried in disorderly tombs. We saw volunteers clambering over the concrete, looking for signs of life. But the bodies of those who have lost their lives were visible between the cracks. When the volunteers find a mattress, when they find a bed, they know they're likely to find a body as well, because the earthquake struck at night and most people were asleep. And I think they found another body here. Further up, we heard a tortured cry from the man on the left. The volunteers had found the body of his 12-year-old daughter, wrapped in a blanket which had laid on her bed. She was carried down the slope by her uncle as he called out her name. Layla, he cried. Layla. Have you checked to see if she's alive or not? Do you know if she's alive? But the girl had passed away. We found her father, called Juma Aktop, and he wanted to say a few words. How do you feel now? I'm sure that you have been looking for her since the earthquake struck.
Evet,
Yes, I have.
şu an nasıl
How do I
ediyorum?
feel?
Dünya
The
yıkıldı
world
ya.
has collapsed on my head, that's all I can say.
Öyle söyleyeyim.
Friends and relatives gathered near the rubble, hoping for something like a miracle. But they were also angry. The first excavator had only just arrived.
Where are they? Where are they? There are no vehicles, no electric, there's nothing here, no generators.
Hiçbir şey yok. Hiç jeneratör yok. İnsanlar
People will die from the cold and hunger.
Sesimi duyan var mı?
Some are trying, volunteers and others, who think the residents at Abra still have a chance at life. And we were taken to see a survivor. There's a person in this van who has just been rescued, who's just been pulled out of the rubble, so we're going to try and have a word.
Biz yaşamakta mı
The
haksızız? Yani
shame,
ne bileyim
I don't
bilmiyorum.
know what to do.
Öldük geri döndük
My
öldük
children
ama
are in the building, my children are in the building.
çocuklar bir şey.
Mustafa spent 2 days in the rubble, and he thinks many residents could have been rescued.
Orada bir sürü yaşayan
A lot
insan
of
vardı.
people were alive screaming, they were
Seslerinde değil
tapping on the
ama
walls to
taşlarla
communicate,
birbirimize haber
but
veriyorduk,
nobody was
duvarlara
searching
vurarak
for
ses
us.
yapıyorduk. Ama hiçbir çalışma yapmadı. Yani orada yaşayan
Now,
insanlar bu
nobody
zamana
will be
kadar
alive.
bekler mi ya?
A small group gathered in front of Block A. They could see their relatives through a slit in the concrete, but they couldn't crawl inside. This woman couldn't hide her distress.
15 saat boyunca hiçbir şey gelmedi. Annem orada yaşayan
My brother was alive for 15 hours, and nobody came to help us. My brother was alive, she says. The Turkish government says it's doing everything it can. The rescue operation is improving every day. But this city at the epicenter is struggling to cope with grief and devastation.
And if we lived in a world where we didn't muck about and wasted our time on competition and all this kind of stuff, all the countries would have a better infrastructure. Everyone would be working together and coordinating all the time. Everyone would have all the equipment they would ever need for such eventualities. And people wouldn't be suffering and dying unnecessarily. And people wouldn't be cutting corners for money, or not being able to help as much because of money. Here's about AstraZeneca.
Ms Doris has been MP for Mid Bedfordshire since 2005, and in recent years.
Good morning, this is Ian King live in our business and economic news from the heart of the city. Well, shares of AstraZeneca have jumped by more than 4% this morning, up 5% now in fact, and that's despite news of a 7% drop in revenues during the final 3 months of last year as sales of its COVID-19 vaccine fell away. However, stripping out the COVID vaccine, AstraZeneca's share sales rose by 17% during the quarter, while for the year as a whole they were up by 19%. The second largest company in the FTSE 100 reported a full-year operating profit of $3.8 billion. That was up from 1% in 2021. Well, joining me now is Neil Shah. He's Director of Research at Edison Group. Neil, welcome to you. I mean, one of the big things that jumped out at me was that in the latest quarter, the cancer treatments, which have obviously been blockbusters for them, were slightly lower than expectations. But the market's just seen through this.
Yeah, I think the bigger picture is that I think people they've been upgrading guidance all the way through 2022. I think the fact that they've actually come in on the profitability side's, been a focus because Pascal's done a great job in terms of turning around Astra, but it's yet to turn into this sort of upgrade story. So margins are a big focus, and I think that's why the stock's reacting the way it is.
Yes.
And then I think, the cancer...
Just the salivation over money, and to forget your own words that you're talking about cancer treatment as being blockbuster. There's people's lives and quality of lives. But this it shows it, isn't it? This shows what's really this world's all about. Humans care, despite all their arguments that they make, and professions care more about money than humanity. Take care, take it easy, God bless and peace.